You're live with Get Connected. Mike Agerbo here, broadcasting from home, which I think all broadcasters are probably doing in radio right now. I've got John Biehler on the line as well. How's your home studio today?
It's great. I'm in my kitchen living room, open concept space. My cat is sleeping behind me, and everything's good.
We have a great show for you today. We will be talking with a few folks. One, a friend of ours who's over in Spain right now. He's a digital nomad who works remotely there. He used to be here in the Lower Mainland, and so we're going to see how he's holding up and what technology he's using to keep connected. We'll also be talking with our good friend Erin Lawrence out of Calgary, Alberta, giving us some tips on how to set up the right home office to stay in communication and get some work done. Plus, we're going to be talking about 3D printing. John is our resident 3D printing expert / nerd. And we're following these stories right now about people wanting to print medical supplies for hospitals and doctors. Is that the right thing to do right now? Well, we'll get the lowdown on that. Let's talk about some of the news happening in the tech world as we all share a common issue right now, the pandemic. We're all being isolated at home. Some interesting stuff here, John. A lot of us are using Zoom or Google Hangouts or Skype to keep connected. Well, there's another one called Wearaby. And unfortunately, I don't know if you saw this story, John. In Norway, some students in an online class had that class crashed by a naked man.
Not surprising. I've heard some stories about people getting rerouted to the wrong Zoom meeting, and so it's like Zoom roulette.
Yeah, that's kind of a scary thing, especially when kids are involved.
And absolutely.
In this particular instance, they say that the man was able to guess, I guess, the link. I don't know how you do that, but apparently that's what happened.
Yeah, well, it's a pretty long string for the link for the Zoom meetings, but not all of them are password protected, which would have prevented that from happening. But adding a password adds complexity to the users, especially people that aren't normally used to worrying about video conferencing from home and having all this technology thrust upon them out of necessity right now.
Yeah, Zoom, which I think a lot of people are using, they're trying to deal with a problem called Zoom bombing. This is the act of spamming a Zoom chat with pornography. It's crazy.
Well, the sad thing is there's a lot of people with a lot of free time right now.
Yeah, unfortunately. Also, in the news week this week, this was kind of an interesting / disturbing, I don't know how to feel about it story. Trudeau says the government isn't using cell phone data to curb the spread of the virus. There was an article on an online digital magazine that said that the Toronto mayor was looking at using cell phone data to make sure people were staying put and not congregating in large groups, which kind of opens a slippery slope if the government's able to access that data.
Absolutely, and this is something that I think South Korea was one of the first countries to do this, where if you wanted to go out, you would have to basically respond to text messages from the government, and if you were where you weren't supposed to be, they would actually send police to get you, and they would go and break up gatherings and things like that as well. So it's a whole new level of Big Brother. Like you, it's one of those things like, I don't want those people doing that, but I also don't want this to sort of stick around after this is all resolved either, too. We saw a lot of that kind of thing happen with 9/11 after the events there with Homeland Security and all the changes to border security, basically, and even just air travel in general. They were still around until a little while ago, and it's pretty far-reaching, and I think it might also help illuminate to people how easy it is for someone, the government or a hacker, to actually really know a lot about you and where you are.
Yeah, I'm really torn on this one, John. At one point, I think great technology that can help curb these types of pandemics, but you know governments, once they get something, they're very unlikely to give it up. We've seen that with the CCTV cameras, the closed circuit cameras. Especially over in Europe and China,
Hmm.
they're everywhere now, and
Yeah.
they're not going away. And so, if we allow them to have access to this data, during these times, will they give it up when it's over?
Yeah, well, and I think the CCTV camera is an interesting perspective because that's generally in public places. It's not in your house. It's not in your bathroom. It's not wherever your phone is. And essentially, what's to stop them from wanting to like turn on your camera to see that you're actually where you're supposed to be, and that you're not GPS spoofing or something like that too, right? Like like you said, it's a slippery slope, and it's something that we need to sort of keep our politicians and government in check about, and make sure that they don't overstep. And also, too, to that, um, we're seeing more and more issues with different apps that people are using for these types of things. When you consider that, Zoom is, seen a 67% rise in usage, and it's being used by people that probably shouldn't be using it from a security standpoint, and they're only using it because it's what's available to them. We saw recently that in the UK, Boris Johnson was actually running all of his parliamentary meetings with Zoom. And what if they're talking about sensitive stuff that the Zoom people aren't vetted to actually access or see? Those kinds of things. So there's on both sides of the fence. I think there's a lot of issues that are cropping up, and I don't see any end in sight to some of these challenges.
Well, I was reading a story on iPhone in Canada .ca, saying that Zoom is through their iOS app reportedly sending user data to Facebook.
Yeah, even if you're not on Facebook.
What? What? How does that happen?
I Yeah, I don't know. It's just one of those things that, people build in that may or may not ever get used. And then, when it's out there, and especially when there's this huge surge in usage, it's hard to take that back. And not everyone's going to be updating their app to, remove that feature if that's something they've actually done. And it's also, it just really highlights the things that we talk about all the time on the show about, you know, giving permissions to things that you don't know. Right now, we're in a bit of a sort of crisis management mode. We're giving lots of apps access to things we wouldn't normally do, because we have to for either work continuity or even just to stay in touch with family and friends. But it's something that I think we're all going to want to revisit very quickly once this is all resolved and we actually have some sort of normalcy back in our lives.
Let's turn to some good tech news. John, this was a great story. Dyson, we obviously love their vacuums and fans and blow dryers. They are getting into manufacturing ventilators to address the shortage, and basically saying that they are going to ramp up and make 10,000 ventilators for the UK government,
Hmm.
which I thought was amazing.
Well, it's interesting too because James Dyson basically designed it from scratch over a couple of days. I think basically that's kind of what he's famous for is solving problems in an interesting way or looking at it from a new angle without maybe the previous baggage of knowing a lot about that particular industry. Because let's be honest, Dyson's known for their their household and health and beauty products, not their medical products. At least as far as I'm aware, that might be different. They might actually be in hospitals a lot more than I think. But yeah, it's interesting, and this speaks to what we'll talk about a little bit later on about the 3D printing and sort of the whole maker movement and just trying to solve problems creatively in a short amount of time with potentially limited resources to help get us past this issue.
Let's talk about free stuff happening right now. A lot of tech companies giving away free services, software during the pandemic. Apple announced this week, I think just yesterday, that its Pro apps are free for 90 days. So these are their high end video and audio editing software suites, including Final Cut Pro and Logic Pro. They are also offering free books for kids.
Hmm.
uh, Disney and Sesame Street books. So something to keep the kids entertained while everyone's locked away at home, which I thought was nice.
Yeah, no, that's one thing that's been really surprising is how generous a lot of these companies are giving their products and services away to help entertain the various people, and it's been great.
We have a lot to talk about on today's program. Later on, we'll be talking with a few folks that are at home. One, a friend of ours, his name's Duane Storey. He is on lockdown in Valencia, Spain. He's a developer from the Lower Mainland that moved over there to work. We'll be chatting with him on what it's like over there and how he's getting by. We'll also be chatting with Erin Lawrence, our good friend out of Calgary, Alberta. She's going to give us some tips on setting up a nice home office working space to make you more productive when you are at home. And as John alluded, we will be talking about 3D printing and specifically 3D printing medical supplies. Is this the right thing to do? Can hospitals use this from the maker community? Well, John will give us the lowdown on that. You're listening to Get Connected here on the Corus Radio Network. Back after this. You are back with Get Connected. Mike Agerbo here with John Biehler. Well, recently, John and I actually were in Spain, which seems to be the hotbed of the coronavirus, along with Italy over in Europe right now. I think we got out just in the nick of time before it really exploded. So they are having a pretty tough time over there. They've really instituted some lockdown measures, making sure people were self-isolating. While we were there, we met one of your friends, John, who came up to visit from Valencia, up where we were staying in Barcelona. His name is Duane Storey. He's a Canadian, a digital nomad, I call him, that has moved from Canada and is working in Spain, and we have him on the line. Duane, thanks for joining us.
No problem. Thanks for having me, guys.
You are in Valencia, Spain right now, and you actually work from Spain. Web developer, is that correct?
Yep, I'm mostly a software developer, web developer.
What's it like living and working there right now?
Well, I mean, to be honest, most people who are freelancers like myself, a lot of the client work has dropped off simply because I think nobody wants to be spending money, and a lot of the businesses are sort of based in North America that employ people like me, so they're all basically hunkering down, I think, for what's coming. So yeah, I think a lot of freelancers here, myself included, a lot of the income's dried up and people are really starting to question what's going to happen next. So,
has your business completely dried up?
Not really. I still have a few client projects on the go. I'm in a fortunate position where I do have some of my own projects that I can work on right now. So for me, having the client work disappear isn't too hard to deal with. But I do know some people that are, sort of paycheck to paycheck. So for them, this is quite a bit scarier, what's going on.
What are the streets like there? Completely locked down?
We're allowed to do 3 things right now in Spain, one of which is to get groceries approximately once a week. Another is to walk a dog if you have one. So as you can imagine, renting a dog has become a hot commodity.
Renting a dog?
Yeah, some people, I don't know if it's in jest, but they're offering to rent their dog for a couple hours at a time.
Poor dogs, eh?
I know. Well, some of these dogs do. I think they've been walked 12 times a day and they're just exhausted. And the last thing we're allowed to do is visit a pharmacy. So most of the time when you look outside, you just see people going to grab groceries with a shopping bag, and there's hardly any people on the streets. And especially in the evening, it's a ghost town. So.
How are you finding communicating with your clients? Where are they mostly? Are they in North America, or are they all over the world?
Yeah, I'd say like 25% are in Europe and the other 75% are North America. So for the most part, I mean, I never entertain a lot of conference calls really with them. It's mostly emails and Slack. So it's not a huge change.
How are you feeling though? I mean, you're a Canadian. You're from the Lower Mainland area, and now you're literally trapped in your place. In what is arguably one of the not best spots to to be right now.
Well, to be honest, I don't feel too bad just because of I'm sort of in the demographic that does pretty good with COVID-19, and I am fortunate. I am in a place that's pretty comfortable. I feel bad for the Canadians who are trapped in Spain, who don't have a permanent residence, and I follow them all on Facebook, all the expat groups, and some of them are desperately waiting for the repatriation flights that are supposed to be coming and haven't come, because even locally here, I mean, the hotels are starting to shut down. So if you were here on a temporary basis, you're starting to have nowhere to go. So it's quite scary for those people who are here on vacation and then just couldn't get out in time. So I'm not sure what's going to happen with them, to be honest. So.
Yeah, I feel really fortunate that we got out when we did. I came back at the beginning of March, and um, things hadn't really exploded quite yet. And everyone keeps saying that you guys were so lucky to get back, basically hassle free. How have you find the social interactions when you're, one of the things I loved about Spain was going out for the tapas and all that kind of stuff, and that sort of socializing that is pretty much nonstop, at least when we were there for sure. Um, but have you found that, technology has done pretty good to supplement that?
Yeah, I think especially for people like me who aren't, originally from Spain, resorting to Zoom, it's not ideal, but it certainly is nice to connect with people on a limited basis. My heart goes out to the actual people in Spain and Italy because, as you guys know, such a huge part of the culture in Europe is socializing and going to pubs and cafes. And I think especially a lot of the elderly population, they're not into Zoom. They don't know what FaceTime is. And so for them to be stuck at home, it must just be, it's like their souls are just being crushed. So, I'm thankful that, this is my sector, technology, and, talking to friends online, especially with my family in Canada, it's not so foreign to me. But if that were not the case, this would be much, much harder to endure for sure.
Talking with Duane Storey. He's a digital nomad from Canada, working over in Valencia, Spain, and just listening to his story, so to speak. Duane, I want to thank you very much, and I'll let you get back to renting a dog.
Oh, yeah, no problem. Thanks for having me, guys. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, stay safe, and thanks for joining us again.
Thanks.
When we come back from the break, we got a lot more tech to talk here, including chatting with our good friend Erin Lawrence, one of our favorite tech journalists over in Calgary, and seeing how she's holding up and what tech she's using to stay connected. Back after this. You are back with Get Connected. Mike Agerbo here with John Biehler. We're going to talk working from home, as I think many of us are. On the line, we've got our good friend Erin Lawrence. She is all the way over in Calgary. And we're going to talk with Erin about some of the tips she has for working from home. Thanks for joining us, Erin.
Thanks for having me, guys.
So where do you start? We all got our laptops. What else should we be concerned about?
Well, I started with lighting. I recently did a makeover of my home office, before all this kind of blew up. And I started with the lighting. And for me, that's what keeps me on track and on task. So I did a quick, simple switch out of my overhead fixture, which is not super techie. Pretty much anyone can do that. But I also added in some smart lighting. I'm a big fan. I think we've talked about this before. I'm a big fan of Phillips Hue Lighting. It's really easy to use. You can control it with your voice. You can change the colors. And it's a way to give your office a little bit of pizzazz if you don't have the time or the inclination, or you can't go out to get paint. You can sort of use the colored light to change the look of your office. You can use warm colored lights like red, orange, yellow to warm up the office, and similarly cooler colored lights like blue, green, purple to cool things down if you want. And plus it just gives you the added option of moving light where you might need task light too.
Well, that's the nice thing about the Philips Hue lights. I've got a few of them in my home, and I love the ones that have the ability to change, into the different colors as well, because it really adds a lot of versatility to that light and to the particular room you're in. And you know what? You're right. It makes a huge difference having the right light in your working space.
I find that it just keeps you on task. If you're kind of working in a dark corner that's not purpose built for working from home, it doesn't feel like a workspace. But having good bright light, especially if you can just tell Google or Alexa to turn the lighting up or down for you, makes things really easy.
Well, let's talk about laptops now. I think a lot of us have brought our laptops from work home, and that's what we're working on. How do you create like a functional workspace?
I went ahead and I really wanted to add like a big wraparound widescreen monitor, but it wasn't in the budget for me right now. It wasn't in the cards. But I'm an Apple user and I have an iPad as well. So one of the things that Apple's done recently is they've added a feature, I guess, called Sidecar. And what it lets you do is if you're running the new Catalina operating system, it lets you use the iPad as a second screen. So you can either mirror your computer's display or you can use it as a second screen. So that's allowed me to have extra screen real estate. I'm doing a lot of things from home, as I'm sure a lot of people out there are. And it just gives you the ability to keep an eye on a couple of different things at once. And Apple actually makes it really easy to get it set up and running for you.
It's actually cool. I love that feature. I've got a few laptops, one of them being a MacBook, and just having that, that iPad there as a second screen really does add a lot of versatility to it. Mouse or trackpad?
I've been a diehard trackpad user for a long time, but I find the more I'm spending time at my desk, we start to develop that sore wrist, the carpal tunnel, whatever you want to call it. So I've actually gone and brought in my full mouse, and the one I use is called, and I always mispronounce it, Evoluent. It's a vertical mouse. So what it essentially is picture your computer mouse, but turned up on its side. So the buttons are kind of on the side, not on the top. And it takes a bit of getting used to, but what it does is it puts your wrist in a more natural position. So if you're doing a lot of computer work at your desk on a laptop, you don't get that wrist hunch and put the tension on your wrist. This holds your wrist in a much more natural position and just makes that mouse work a lot easier, even if you're using a laptop.
I've seen that. It looks kind of weird. Is it uncomfortable to use? To me, it looks uncomfortable.
It's extremely comfortable. I've been using one, I would say, for probably about 10 or 15 years. I've replaced it, I think, maybe once ever. It's really durable. It's just that getting used to it because it does feel weird. I'd say for the first day or so, I probably wanted to chuck it out the window, but I stuck with it and I've really noticed a difference for me. That's why I went, even though I'm doing a lot of laptop work at home and will often use my trackpad for quick stuff, I decided, it's starting to hurt my wrist. So the more time I'm going to spend at my desk, I'm going to do it right. I'm going to get the mouse in and I'm going to use a vertical mouse.
We're talking with Erin Lawrence. She's with techgadgetscanada.com, a great website if you want to find the latest gadget reviews. I want to thank you for joining us today, Erin.
Thanks, you guys.
When we come back from the break, have you got a 3D printer and have thought of printing out all sorts of medical devices for your local hospital? Hold tight. John is going to tell us what you should be doing and what you shouldn't be doing. You're listening to Get Connected here on the Chorus Radio Network. Back after this. You are back with Get Connected. Mike here with John and AJ. I want to talk about 3D printing. A lot of news stories about people trying to print different types of medical devices and supplies that are in short supply. John, you are a 3D printing guru. What do you make of all of this?
Well, it's really exciting to see so many people are interested in putting their printers to good use. Normally when we're talking about 3D printing, we're talking about fun things like, printing baby Yodas and that kind of stuff, not life-saving medical equipment. And I certainly got tagged on a lot of stories coming out of Italy and Spain where they were 3D printing essential, ventilator valves and other, various face masks and that kind of thing. And it's a really complicated issue. A lot of people don't realize that, most hobby 3D printers are in someone's garage. They're quite dirty machines. They're not up to medical grade quality for a lot of this type of stuff. And a lot of people are also quick to say, well, this is an emergency. They'll take what they can get. Like, no, you could actually make it worse. Because the problem with 3D printing is, at least with the filament-based printers, which is what most people have in their homes, is that they're great carriers of bacteria. They all have little layer lines and little grooves and pockets and really great places for bacteria to live and thrive in. And it's been proven that the COVID-19 virus actually really seems to love plastic. So that's not a place that you want to put it on. You also can't properly sterilize a lot of the printed parts because if you put it into an autoclave, which will heat it up and essentially boil off the bacteria, it'll destroy the item. So what I have seen, though, that has been really encouraging and really interesting is a lot of people looking at alternative things that they can print that can help in that situation. So things like face masks, for example, and I've got a couple, I'm showing on the video podcast right now, a couple different designs that some different companies have come up with. And there's actually a lot of these designs for taking basically a headband and allowing you to attach some kind of shield, to protect the healthcare workers from any kind of droplets from getting into them, and some really creative designs. And this is, I think, really kind of the key point of the maker community that it comes behind this type of stuff is they take an idea where there's a problem with something like this situation where something like this took me four or 5 hours to print, and then someone found a really simple version to print. This takes about an hour, and I'm holding up a really simplified headband. And one of the creative things that they've discovered is that a lot of hospitals have 3-hole punches. So this is actually meant, this headband is meant to take a 3-hole punched sheet of mylar, which is essentially like a report cover or just a sheet of plastic. So you just need a 3-hole punch, and then you can attach it to the headband. Takes about an hour. These can be printed, fairly quickly in volume by a lot of people, and there's not really any concern for bacteria in this type of situation. But the other key point that I can't stress enough, and I keep getting asked about this online, is I want to help. I'm going to start printing. I'm like, no, you shouldn't, because not all hospitals will take that stuff from you. They all have different levels of need. And what they need, and also what's compatible with all the other stuff that they're currently using. I've even heard people are sewing face masks, which is great, and they're using up all their scrap fabric, which is awesome. And certainly in an emergency, that works. But in hospitals, some hospitals actually color code their face masks so people in the hospital know, well, that person's got a black mask. They're a very high important person. Get out of their way. Don't go near them, kind of thing. So there's lots of different rules and issues that you have to deal with, which is why medical equipment tends to cost so much. And they're not going to, jump in and start taking 3D printed stuff unnecessarily. We also have a lot of people that are really wanting to help, and they're actually pestering hospitals. How can I help? That's not how you do it. Don't go to the hospital. Don't go. Don't bother anybody unless you actually have a contact that's not busy working. And the best way to do this is through the maker spaces or the groups that you're probably already part of if you have a 3D printer. There's people in there that are coordinating and gathering sort of a list of people that are available, have equipment, have the right type of filament or other materials on hand, and they're taking those things and talking with the hospitals with a contact person that's not actively on the hospital floor to find out what's actually needed at that particular location. Some of these things aren't even compatible with some of the stuff they have, but like I said, ingenuity is coming into play. I'm holding up a snorkeling mask that I have, and someone actually figured out that you could actually redesign what normally would be the snorkel mount and actually have a ventilator mount for it to use this as a makeshift ventilation mask. And it's really clever, but they're not always compatible with whatever the hospital has on hand. So it's really important that those people know what's going on and what is actually needed, because not everything is needed. But despite what you see in the media, some hospitals have good supplies, and it's not all hospitals that need it as well. Some of even grocery store people can use these face masks that are being 3D printed because they're dealing with the public and potentially still getting it, and they're not in a surgical environment where it's important that they have a sterile device.
John.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Mike.
Just quickly, AJ. John, you don't seem very passionate about this.
Not at all. No. I feel like I spent all my free time talking to people about this when I'm not working on the show and doing other things while we're working from home, because it comes up all the time. People keep tagging me on this stuff because they see something on the news and it sounds great, but it's very localized. And so I just encourage people, if you're interested in this, seek out the right resources and don't start printing unnecessarily because you're going to be wasting your time most likely.
Well, I just wanted to tag on one thing you said, John, about about how plastics can be an easy place for the COVID virus to sort of grab onto and transfer from. And it actually reminded me of a story that I recently read. So some scientists from Canada's McMaster University used a combination of nanoscale surface engineering and chemistry to develop a plastic surface, and it's a treated form of transparent wrap almost, which could be sort of wrapped around any kind of surface, and it actually repels all kinds of bacteria. And the idea is that it's going to be used to prevent the transfer of antibiotic-resistant superbugs.
Right.
How great would that be in hospitals? That would be amazing.
Yeah, and so I want to reach out. I want to find more about this company and actually see if they've done testing with COVID-19. Because when I first came across them, this was back in December before we knew about this issue.
Very cool. So, John, there's quite a few 3D printers out there. What are you recommending? I mean, I'm sure if the hospitals are in desperate need of something, they would actually probably reach out to the community.
Well, definitely, and certainly, there's a lot of doctors and nurses that are in the community already. They're makers, when they're not at the hospital. I know personally a couple ER doctors and nurses that I've talked to, and they're working with these maker groups to find exactly what they need, and making sure, because again, these things aren't quick to print, and there is cost involved for the materials, and so I think the people should just try to find the proper avenue for that, as opposed to just, bringing a bunch of printed stuff by the hospital. Because again, you shouldn't be going to the hospital anyways unless you need to be there.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we're going to have to take another break. When we come back, more tech to talk here on Get Connected. Stay tuned. You are back with Get Connected. Mike, AJ, and John here. Well, it's interesting times. I thought I'd just do a few housekeeping items here at the end of the show. We've got a new website that I want to mention. It's called gcpix.com. We talk a lot about different cool gadgets and stuff on the show that we feature on Global TV and the television program. Well, we're going to be putting a lot of our favorites up on this website so that you can find the links easy to the stuff that we've talked about. And hopefully that will make it a little simpler for you to find some of this gear. I want to give a shout out to Trevor Dubinsky. He wrote a really nice email saying that when he was a kid, he had fond memories of Saturday morning cartoons, but now that his kids are growing up, their memory will be the theme from our Get Connected radio show every Saturday morning, which is great that he's forcing his children to listen to us. But thanks a lot, Trevor. John, let's talk about what we would like from some of our listeners.
Yeah, well, we're trying to figure out what you guys might want to listen to while we are, sort of changing the format a little bit and working from home and broadcasting from home. Is there any kind of things that you want us to talk about? Do you want us to talk more about, virus solutions for isolation, or do you want us to talk about tech like nothing's going on, or somewhere in between? So if you have any things that you'd like us to talk about specifically that we can address, in a 5 to 10 minute segment, let us know. Go to our website, getconnectedmedia.com, and you can hit the feedback form, and you can just send us a note. And we will try to get to as many as we can on upcoming shows. But I thought it would be a good opportunity for us to sort of get a little bit of feedback from you as to what you want us to talk about, because, things are a little different right now, and we want to make sure that we're not, talking about the virus too much, or we're not talking about it enough. Just is there something in there that is a sweet spot for our listeners?
One thing I'm thinking about is just the fact that there's things that people might take on as hobbies now that they do just to sort of fill some of that time. And one thing that jumps right to mind is ancestry, family trees. And that's something really interesting that you can do right now with the use of software, things like ancestry.ca. But if there's any kind of hobby you're into, just let us know and we'll find out, get some good guests on for you.
I want to thank everyone that helps put the show together. AJ, John, Christina, Paul, Nigel, and of course, Stephen. And don't forget to hit our website, getconnectedmedia.com. We're giving away a Google Nest Mini. This is a great smart speaker. AJ, you can't win it. I saw your little face light up there. Again, all you have to do is go to the newsletter section, subscribe to the newsletter, and you're entered to win this contest and every contest going forward. It's like a dream come true.
Yeah.
We'll see you again next week.